Good evening and welcome to our candidate information session. I do recognize some faces out there this evening. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is John Kennedy. I'm the City Clerk and Returning Officer for the City of Peterborough election. Before I introduce our guest speaker this evening, there's just a few matters of housekeeping I'd like to address. Following tonight's session, for those of you that are interested in candidate information, you can check either the City of Peterborough or the respective township websites. We all have information posted. You can also check with your respective clerk's office, whether it's City of Peterborough or the townships. Tonight's information session is a partnership between the City of Peterborough and our colleagues who represent the townships in the County of Peterborough. So I did want to say thanks to them for their assistance and attending this evening. I know we have some representatives here. Perhaps I could ask them just to stand up and identify themselves. Don't be shy. Sure.
I'm Martina Chee-Hartwig. I'm the acting clerk for the Township of Durham.
Cindy Page. I'm the clerk for the Township of Catamonigan.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm also joined by several of my colleagues here as part of the City of Peterborough team. I also want to say thanks to them for their planning and organizational skills for this evening. And I think I see Sue out here, if you want to acknowledge yourself, Sue.
Good evening, all.
And my other colleague, Natalie's over there in the wings there. So.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Natalie. I think we'd all agree Market Hall is a great venue to host these type of events. So we're very happy to always partner with Chad and Patricia and their team. So again, thanks to the Market Hall team for supporting us this evening. We appreciate that. Tonight's information is also being live streamed and recorded. So a shout out and a welcome to those who are attending remotely. For anyone who is interested in obtaining the recording following our session, it will be uploaded to the City of Peterborough site. So give us a few days and we'll have it up there. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Stan, who is providing the live streaming this evening. So thanks, Stan. Washrooms are located in the main lobby, out back where you're registered there. There's also, in that same area, light refreshments are for sale there, if you feel you need something. Just, and again, we'd encourage you to, where appropriate, to social distance and wear a mask this evening. In terms of our format, following the presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. And if you have one, we'll come to you with a portable mic so you guys don't have to move around too much. You can answer your question. And we are scheduled to close at 9 p.m. here. Our guest speaker this evening is Mr. Fred Dean. In the municipal sector, he is well known and respected. In fact, some would consider him to be of legendary status. Fred has worked with elected officials and municipal staff, giving their civic leaders the tools to make effective decisions on behalf of their communities. Fred is a lawyer who acts exclusively for municipalities and municipal associations in Ontario. He began his career with the Borough of Scarborough and later moved to the City of Brampton. Fred was the city solicitor for the City of Sudbury for 23 years. He regularly contributes at the AMO conference, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and has also been the chair of a number of other conferences and associations, such as the Ontario Good Roads Conference for, I believe it's 35 years. Fred has facilitated training for the Municipal Act and effective municipal councillor programs for AMO. He's also very knowledgeable on the intricacies of municipal government, offering sage advice to municipal staff and civic leaders. Fred's presentations focus on the roles and relationships between the mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. Insightful and entertaining, Fred has shared his experiences and expertise with municipal councils and notable organizations such as AMO, also the Association for Yukon Communities, the Ontario Good Roads Association, and the American Public Works Association. So we're very excited to have Fred here this evening to share his valuable information that voters, potential candidates, and municipal staff alike can benefit from. So please give a warm welcome for Mr. Fred Dean.
What a great facility. Good evening and welcome. I'm really pleased you're here. As you heard, I get the opportunity to speak to a lot of municipal councils around the province, to a lot of municipal staff, and speak at conferences. And I've been doing these sessions for 4 elections. And I have to tell you, for every term of council, every 4-year term of council, this is the most important session I do. I really believe it's significant that you've come out tonight, whether you're here, whether you're streaming or online. Because if you're interested, you're thinking about running for municipal office, running for council, running for head of council, I want to congratulate you. I think it's a really significant step because the roles of members of council are community leaders. And that's pretty significant. What I want to do tonight is share with you some things about municipal government. I'm going to talk about some technical parts, but I'm going to talk about some personal things that I think you need to give some consideration to before you decide to put your name in on May 2nd. That's the first day. And you have right through till the 19th of August to register as a candidate. 2 p.m. on the 19th of August is the cutoff time. So we're going to cover a lot of material. Logistically, we talked about having questions as we go, which I normally do, but because we're live streaming and because we're miking it, we're going to do all the questions at the end. The presentation will be available on the various municipalities' websites, and if you need a copy or want a copy, you can get it that way. I'm not going to spend any more time. The one thing that is really interesting from my point of view, and I'm really proud of, in 2007, AMO, the Association of Municipalities, named me to their honor roll, and I'm on the honor roll if you ever go to the AMO offices as a municipal coach, which to me was a real compliment when it came. So I work with the municipalities and the people, and I think it's really important, and I have a sense of what municipal government is like. I get asked all the time, what are the things you should look for in a candidate? What should you look for in people that want to run for office? And I always identify 2 things. First is integrity, and the second is vision. And if a person has those 2 qualities, I think they'll be excellent at being on council. They're both really significant, really important. We're going to talk a little bit about each of them tonight in a different context. So here's what we're going to do. I offer a program on municipal governance that takes anywhere from a day to 4 days. We're going to do it tonight in about 7 minutes. We'll get the basics down, but it's going to be compacted. But we're going to get to the fundamentals. I'm going to talk about municipal powers because it's a really important element of who can do what within a municipality and where do the powers come from and who has responsibility for what. So we'll spend some time talking about that. I'm going to talk about accountability and transparency. You'll hear that phrase in local government a lot, and I'm going to talk about what that means and the fact that the reality is local government is more accountable and it's more transparent than any other level of government. And I'll show you why. We'll talk about why. I get a lot of calls during the term of a council from municipalities and communities saying we're having real problems within the organization. And there are a couple of areas that are really key, but one of them that sits at the top of the list generally is a misunderstanding of the roles that people play and the responsibilities they have, and an understanding of not only their role, but the roles of other people within the organization. So I'm going to take you through that, because I think it's got important information for you in terms of what your expectations might be in terms of being on council. I'm then going to switch gears. We're going to talk about some personal considerations. What do you need to be thinking about in terms of how your life will change if you're elected to council, because it will. I can guarantee you, I can promise you that. We'll talk about that, and I'm going to put that in the context also of municipal codes of conduct for members of council, members of committee and local boards. And we'll spend a few minutes talking about, in a broad general way, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and how that applies and how that becomes important to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about confidentiality, and we'll finish. I want to talk for just a few minutes about water, because it gives you an example of the importance and the significance of the role that members of council play. So we have a lot to cover. And I thought I'd put you to work before I get to work. I'd like to spend just 5 minutes with the group here, and I want you to identify for me as many things as possible that municipalities and local government does for you and your community. And I'm looking not at the 30,000 foot level, I'm looking at granular, right down to ground level in terms of some of the activities. So can someone just give me one activity municipalities do? Service?
Garbage collection.
Garbage collection. What goes along with that?
Recycling.
Yeah, what else?
Transfer stations.
Transfer station, sure. It's pretty significant in terms of, do you collect food separately here too?
No.
No, some places do, some don't. Yeah, that's pretty significant. What's another one? We'll do public transit, and it can have a number of different elements to it as well, really important. There's another one over here.
Snow plowing.
Okay, let's put snow plowing in context. That's good, because it's right. What else goes along with snow plowing?
Roads.
Tell me about roads.
Different levels of roads, depending on the municipality, whether it's first or second tier, if it's a tertiary road or...
Yeah, there are different kinds of roads, right? What else about roads?
Maintenance.
Maintenance, summer maintenance, winter maintenance. Okay, what else?
Signage.
Okay, what's signage? Signage is regulation. Municipalities regulate roads, speed limits, parking, all sorts of things. What else about roads? Safety, that's regulation, and that's design of roads, actually. What else? Pedestrians use road allowances, so do bicycles. The other thing roads do that are really important is that they are conduits for all sorts of utilities that run underneath them. Really important. Each one of those utilities has to have a contract and agreement with the municipality before it's put in place. Roads are really significant part of the municipality, a significant part of the municipal budget. In most places, it's the number one. It's the top priority. What's another thing municipalities do?
Emergency management. Emergency management.
I didn't catch the first.
Emergency management.
Emergency management, exactly. What goes along with what fits within that?
Fire, police, ambulance.
Land ambulance, that's right, fire and police. Pretty significant. And each one of those has various components to it. What's another service?
Protect the poor.
Protect the poor? Yeah, that's a significant part in virtually every municipality. What's another one?
Water and wastewater.
Yeah, water and wastewater. We'll see how important that is in just a little while. What's another one?
Community centers, arenas, sports facilities.
Yeah, parks and rec. All those things that you do as a parks and rec. Some places have golf courses. We had ski hills in Sudbury when I was there. Trails, organized sports fields, just natural. I mean, you're living in this natural beauty with the lakes around and all the rest of it. Pretty significant. Parks and rec programming is a huge activity for municipalities. What's another one?
Affordable housing. Affordable housing.
Affordable housing, yeah. Yeah, another one. Well, let me give you one that in my world is really important, and that's libraries. And the reason I want to mention libraries is municipalities cannot provide library service. They're prohibited from doing so. If a community wants a library, the council must create a public library board. And that library board is responsible for the control of the library and the making the decisions around library services. Local boards, and there are a few of them, Conservation Authority, Health Unit, each have a relationship with the municipality, and that relationship is tied in to the legislation that created them. So you have to look at that link in order to determine what the service is and how it gets provided. So it's a service that's a local service, but it's not a municipal service in terms of being provided or responsible by council. Any others?
Art gallery, museums.
Yeah, the whole cultural aspect, that's right. Another one is cemeteries. Cemeteries are really important. They take a lot of time. They're highly regulated. If an owner of a cemetery in a municipality doesn't want it anymore, who gets it? Municipality does. Municipalities collect taxes. Doesn't much sound like a service, but it really is, because they collect taxes not only for themselves to pay for all these services we're talking about, but lower tier municipalities and the city collect taxes for other agencies as well. So, for example, the county, the lower tier municipalities collect the taxes for the benefit of the county. Okay. We've covered a few things that are a lot more. There are well over 120 services provided by local government to your community that council is responsible for. And a lot of these services are really technical and they're complex. We'll talk about water at the end of it, just to give you an example of the complexity and the importance of it. Council has a huge responsibility. It's a very technical, multi-level, multi-service situation when municipalities are discussed. So you've done well. Municipalities can't just do what they want to do. There's no inherent jurisdiction in a municipality to just do whatever it wants. Every municipality has to find the authority for what it wants to do in a provincial statute, that's an act, or a regulation under the act. There's no inherent jurisdiction, which is really, I think, important to understand. Interestingly, 2001 was a major year in municipal government in Ontario. The Municipal Act, which is a document about 2 or 3 inches thick, had never been rewritten top to bottom for 150 years. And it was in 2001, and it turned a whole bunch of things upside down. And one of them was in relation to how we saw municipalities and municipal powers. Under the pre-2001 era, you had villages and townships and towns and small cities and big cities. And the powers were given to the municipalities based on their size. So villages got a few and the townships got a few more, towns more, small cities and big cities. In 2001, that all disappeared. It's gone. And in fact, there's no reference, generally speaking now, to towns, villages, cities, or townships in the Act. Municipalities can continue to call themselves that. And interestingly enough, pre-2001, in fact, it still happens today, you can't tell how big a municipality is by the description. For example, everybody knows of Dryden in northwestern Ontario. Dryden's a city, has a population of 8,500 people. Oakville is a town, has a population in excess of 200,000 people. So you can't tell by just applying the traditional title to these municipalities. In fact, now a number of municipalities around the province don't use any of those titles, and they just use the word municipality. Municipality of Red Lake, for example. And that's their formal official title. Municipalities now have the ability to change the title of their municipality if they wish to do so. And we'll see how they do that in just a minute. So size no longer matters. The powers now that were given in 2001 were given in a very different way. And the first thing the province did was said there are only 3 kinds of municipalities in the province. Just 3. The first is single tier. We have an example tonight. City of Peterborough is single tier. All of Northern Ontario is single tier. And there are other municipalities in Southern Ontario that are single tier. The province took this bundle of powers and it gave it to all single-tier municipalities. So the city of Peterborough and the township of Red Lake got that same bundle of powers. That's really different than the powers being allocated based on size. The other 2 kinds of municipalities, and you're a perfect county to talk about this because you have the single tier in the city. The other 2 kinds of municipalities are upper tier. Upper tier are counties and regions and districts, and lower tier, which are the townships and the towns within the county. That bundle of powers gets divvied up between the upper tier and the lower tier. Some are exclusive powers, some are shared. And the key is it changes everywhere in the province. So Peterborough County will have different powers allocated in different ways than, say, Hastings County. And it's set out in the legislation, primarily in the Municipal Act. So we now have this concept of just 3 municipalities. Size does not matter now. The powers are given based upon the type of municipality that you are. 2001, this legislation came out, and it was my job to read it. And I got to section 5 and I stopped. And I ended up reading section 5 maybe 10 times. I suspect it was even more than that, because it was so fundamental. It's really short and it's really simple. And it says this, that all powers of a municipality shall be exercised by council and shall be exercised by bylaw. Notice the word shall. When you see shall, that's mandatory. There's no discretion. All powers of a municipality shall be exercised by council, by bylaw. Not by councillors, not by the mayor, not by any staff member, but by council. So the powers come from council, and council exercises the power and gives power to people within the organization. It's really significant, and it will play through a number of things we're going to talk about over the next while. Section 5, in my opinion, is the most important section in the Municipal Act. It's really significant, and it crystallized a lot of things when we came to the new act coming into effect. So, if you want to pass a bylaw, you have to do it at what I call a duly constituted meeting. And there are some elements of that. The first element is you have to tell everybody you're holding a meeting. How do you do that? Well, you post notices on your website. And you do that for all of your council meetings, special meetings, regular meetings, all of your committee meetings. They're all posted. The public is entitled to know that your municipality is meeting and what type of meeting it is. And that includes not only open meetings that the public can attend, but it includes closed meetings where the public is excluded. The obligation is for the municipality to give notice. And that notice is more than just telling you there's a meeting. There will be an agenda and there will be reports. So you'll get the opportunity to see what is on that agenda. It's really important. It's really significant. So the second factor is for a duly constituted meeting to pass a bylaw is it has to be open to the public. The courts have said that the primary reason for the public to be at a council meeting is to observe. And that's part of this transparency, the ability of the public to observe decisions being made and policy being set. It's really fundamental. The next part of the duly constituted meeting test is there has to be a quorum present. Now, I'm going to work with a council of 5 because I'm terrible at math and I have 5 fingers and it works. Okay, so council of 5, what's quorum? Quorum's a majority, that's 3 members. So that means you can have a meeting of council with 5 members or 4 or 3, but you can't get down to 2. Okay, pretty straightforward, pretty fundamental. The next principle is council makes decisions and majority prevails. So if all 5 members are present, how many have to vote in favor of something to pass it? 3, it's the same test. 3 members. What if there are only 2 or 3 members present? We know that's a quorum, you can have a meeting. How many have to vote in favor of it in that circumstance? 2. 2, it's a majority. That's interesting because that's less than a majority of council is exercising power on behalf of the municipal corporation. The final principle is that everybody votes. That includes the head of council, the mayor or the reeve. Everybody votes on issues at council. That's one of the powers given to members of council, including the head of council. I said that local government was the most accountable and transparent form of government that we have. I'm not sure if it's still there, but there used to be a comment on the provincial website, and in fact there was something about this in the federal, respecting the federal government last week, that decisions at cabinet are secret and confidential and the public is not entitled to see them. That's not the case in municipal government. We've just talked about this open and transparent. We've talked about duly constituted meetings. We've talked about exercising power at an open meeting with the public entitled to attend. It's really important. One of the things municipal councils can do and committees can do is go into closed meetings. And you're saying, you know, well, maybe that's not so transparent, but it is to this extent. The province has set out rules for a council to go into a closed meeting or a committee. And the first rule is they can only go into those closed meetings for specific subject matters. And there's a list of subject matters in the Act. No other reason can a council go into a closed meeting. They have to fit within those categories. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they cannot go into a closed meeting without passing a resolution in public. And it says 2 things. Firstly, it says that council's holding a closed meeting. And secondly, it indicates the general nature of the matter or the matters to be dealt with at that closed meeting. So the public has a general sense of what's happening. The third thing that's important is there are rules set out in the Municipal Act about what council can do at closed meetings. What type of votes can they take? And there are limitations on it. So it's part of the transparency, if you will, that I think is really significant in terms of what council can do and when they can do it behind closed doors and when it has to be in an open setting. Another example of accountable and transparent is the list of policies that council has to have in place. Every council in Ontario, all 444 of them, have to have these policies in place, and they are not, policies by the way are passed by bylaw. They're not intended to be dust collectors. They are active documents that get amended from time to time. They get changed, and they're important both to council and to staff. I just want to look at two of them just for a couple of minutes. The first one is a policy called the Accountability and Transparency Policy. If you are thinking of running for council, you need to read this policy. It's really important because it will tell you how your municipality is attempting to be transparent or attempting to ensure that it is being transparent and is being accountable. That's important. So if you're thinking of being a candidate, take a look at that policy. Really important within your municipality. The last two on the list are relatively recent, but I want to just mention the council member staff policy. This is relatively new within the last couple of years, and it's intended to deal with the relationship between individual members of council and staff. Notice it doesn't say council staff policy, it's member of council and staff. This deals with the specific individuals. That policy gets tied into the members' code of conduct. And it's one of these aspects of the relationship between council, members, and staff. It's important to have a look at that. The one off that list, though, I think you really need to take a look at is the Accountability and Transparency Policy. If you're thinking of running for council because you want to manage how the work gets done, you want to be out there directing work, you need to look for another career. That's not your job as a member of council. And the province has set out, I think, in really clear terms what the responsibility of council is, what the responsibility of the head of council, the mayor, and the responsibility of staff. And I want to go through that. Remember I said at the outset, this is an area that municipalities are struggling. This is one of the areas that they have difficulties with. So it's important, if you're going to be considering running for council, to give some thought to what your job description is. What are you there to do? So let's take a look at each one of them. Municipalities are corporations in law. They're not business corporations, they are municipal corporations, but they are persons in law. That means that the council, in effect, becomes the board of directors, that, as we would know a board of directors in a business corporation. But council has far more authority and different scope of responsibility than a business board in a business. So, the powers, Section 5, exercises corporate powers, that fits within Section 5 of the Act. The Municipal Act goes on to say that council represents the public. Of course it does. You're hearing from the public all the time, on the street, delegations at council, they're contacting members of council all the time. The expectation is that you are, as members of council, bringing those ideas to council for deliberation and discussion. You won't see that, by the way, in the job description for staff. Province didn't put that in for staff. The next one's interesting, and it says that council has to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality. And municipality in this case has two meanings. The first is the geographical boundaries, the community. Council has an obligation to consider the best interests of the community. Well, that makes sense. But the second meaning of municipality is the municipal corporation. Council members have an obligation to act in the best interests of the municipal corporation. So it's legislated that that's the case. Interestingly, municipalities also contract that. Policies of insurance that municipalities carry a provision, not only that council members, but also staff act in the best interests of the corporation. No surprise there. There's nothing unusual about that at all. But it's there. So this obligation is both statutory and contractual. I talked about Next point, acting collectively, publicly and with notice, that's the duly constituted meeting. There is nothing in the Municipal Act and the job description given that gives any management responsibilities to any member of staff. It's not there. It's not your job. And we'll see how the province defines that and creates, I think, two completely separate sectors as we do this. There are some limitations on the powers of individual members of council within the organization. I'm not going to talk about those tonight. When you're elected, if you decide to run, part of the orientation will deal with the issue of responsibilities and powers of individual members of council. But at the end of the day, the responsibility rests with the decision-making at the council itself. That's the job description the province has given to council. I want to look at the head of council. One of the other changes in 2001 in this brand new piece of legislation that came in was it got rid of the terms mayor and reeve and warden and chair. They're not in the Act anymore. Instead, there's just this title called head of council. Most places have maintained the title that they had. Mayor of Peterborough is still the mayor of Peterborough as it was before. But some places changed it. And the province said in 2001, councils can change the title that they give to their head of council. Renfrew County, all the townships, and there are a number of townships in Renfrew County, got together, this about 10 years ago, and they said, you know, traditionally townships have had reeves, but they didn't want to have a reeve anymore. They thought mayor had a more recognizable and understandable title for people, and so they changed. All the townships in Renfrew County passed bylaws. They exercised power. They passed bylaws to change the title of the head of council from reeve to mayor. There's one, and by the way, municipalities now can change the title to anything they want. They could have a grand poobah if they wanted to have. Not sure why you'd want to, but they could do that now, and they would do it by a bylaw under Section 5. There's one municipality in the province that has a Lord Mayor. Do you know where that is? No, it's not Toronto. They just think they're the Lord Mayor. And it's not London. It's Niagara-on-the-Lake. Niagara-on-the-Lake got that designation by private legislation back in either the 70s or the 80s. Today, if your municipality, I have no idea why you would, but if your municipality wanted to have a Lord Mayor, council could do that by passing the bylaw. Nobody's rushing out to do it. It fits Niagara-on-the-Lake, but it doesn't fit anywhere else. So when I talk about heads of council, the powers given in the Act now for heads of council include all these mayors and reeves and wardens and chairs. Warden, by the way, is the head of council at the county, chair, the head of council for a region. They're all given the same powers. So the warden has the same powers as the mayor, as a reeve, or as whatever the title might be. If they're head of council, they have all the same powers. The Act says the heads of council preside over council meetings. Well, that makes sense. It's only one place in the province that isn't true, and that's the City of Toronto. The City of Toronto can have another member of council act as the chair of council meetings. That came about in the Mel Lastman days. Mayor Mel really didn't want to chair council meetings. And frankly, I don't blame him. Council meetings in Toronto are 3 days long, full days. So he got put into the legislation that someone else could be appointed to be the chair, and they've done that for a number of years now. But nowhere else. Everywhere else, the obligation is on the head of council to chair council meetings. And the Act goes farther than what I've just got on the slide. The Act says that so that the meetings are run efficiently and effectively. Understand this, if you're thinking of running for mayor, you better be really good at chairing meetings. You need training. It's a skill. It's a very different view of the world sitting in the mayor's chair than it is sitting in the councillor's chair. Believe me, it's very different. And the responsibilities are very different. So heads of council have an obligation to chair meetings efficiently and effectively. That means being prepared. That means knowing what's on the agenda. A whole series of factors that go into it. The Act says that the head of council provides leadership to council. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say provide leadership to the municipal organization. That's because the staff side, the administrative side, the leadership of that comes through the chief administrative officer. We'll come to that in a couple of minutes. The next one is really interesting, and it puts the mayor separate from the rest of council. The head of council speaks on behalf of the municipality. Councillors don't. The head of council speaks on behalf of the municipality, and how do they know what to say? Well, council speaks by passing bylaws and resolutions, and the mayor has an obligation to support those and speak on their behalf. Really important, really significant. Individual members, individual councillors do not have that ability. It's not given to them under the legislation. Mayors, as part of this leadership role, have to provide advice and recommendations on a number of matters. And I just listed a couple there. We don't need to go into detail. One of the big debates that occurred around 2006, give or take, the Municipal Act has historically said that the head of council, the mayor, is the chief executive officer of the municipal corporation, the CEO. And if you're from a business background, you'll know that the CEO means that you are responsible for the day-to-day management of the organization. But you're not in municipal government. So the debate in 2006 was half the municipal sector said, get rid of this title because it just confuses people. And the other half said, no, keep it, but define it. And the province made a decision, because these are the provincial rules. The province said, we're going to define it, and it did. And there are a number of provisions in the Act, 5 or 6 of them, kind of bullet points, that lay out what the responsibilities of the head of council when acting as the chief executive officer. None of them give any management rights to the mayor. None of them. What they do, though, is they create what I refer to as the champion or the cheerleader of your municipality. The person that people expect to hear from, the person they expect to be supporting your municipality and being the cheerleader for it. Best example I can give you is former Mayor of Mississauga, Hazel McCallion. Mayor McCallion was the cheerleader and the champion of Mississauga. It didn't matter where or when you met her, she would tell you how great Mississauga was and how great the people of Mississauga were. That's a champion. She left the administration to the administrative side, the CAO and the other staff. So in the municipal context, it says there the chief executive officer is not the chief administrative officer, because that's the title given to the senior administrator in the municipality. I should mention something here. The chief administrative officer is appointed by bylaw of council. They are the primary resource for giving advice to council. They are the leadership of the administrative team. If you're thinking of running for council, you may want to have a chat with the CAO if you've got some issues around policy, and they might be able to give you some assistance between now and then I'm sure I'm going to get phone calls from CAO saying, what are you doing to us? But if you're serious about this, take the time. They'll take the time, I know. The other person you need to get to know in the next short while is the municipal clerk. Municipal clerks are what are called statutory officers. And by the term, means that they have two job descriptions. They have one from the municipality, but they have another one from the province. And those job descriptions are found in statutes, that's why the name statutory officer, or regulations under the statute. Clerks have a whole bunch of statutory responsibilities. One of them is running the election. When John introduced himself, he introduced himself as the clerk and the chief returning officer. That's a title that he has the responsibility for the election for the city. Clerks do a lot of things in your municipality. They put the agendas together, they're at the meetings, they are the expert on the rules of procedure. If you have any questions about rules of procedure, you need to talk to the clerk. They are the expert in the room, or they should be. If they're not, they're going to be moving on to a new career. It's a really important function that they fulfill. So those two officers, there are other statutory officers, by the way, treasurer, fire chief, chief building official, but for your purposes as candidates, the two people I think you might want to have a chat with is the municipal clerk and the chief administrative officer. This is the section in the Act that deals with staff, with municipal staff, and I think this one's really well written. It's been around for a long time. The first thing it says is that staff undertakes research and provides advice to council. What is that? Well, those are the reports, the written reports that go on an agenda that have a recommendation in them. This says, the legislation says pretty clearly in my world that staff is the primary resource for information for members of council. And we're going to see as we go through this, probably you got a sense of it when we started to identify activities that councils are responsible for, you need to be getting good advice. Because if not, you're swimming without a life jacket. You really need to be cautious, and you need the advice that you're getting. So the province recognized that and said, staff have this obligation to provide advice, make recommendations, and staff have an obligation to receive it. Not to accept it every time necessarily, but to receive it, to hear it. Once council makes a decision, staff have to implement it. Whether staff recommended it or not, staff have to implement it. So it represents the flow of local government. It's pretty much a 2-week process. Staff prepares the reports, gets the agenda together. Oh, by the way, staff does not prepare the agenda. Council does. Because you will find in the procedure bylaw the order of business. Every procedure bylaw in the province has the order of business. Staff fills in the items that go into that when they're preparing the agenda for a specific meeting. The other thing on this, in terms of what the province has said, is staff have to have policies. These aren't council policies, these are administrative policies. Every department has a bunch of policies in terms of how you get things done. Clerks have lots, treasurer have lots, public works, how do they deal with the roads. Just every department has these day-to-day operational policies. And the province said, you have to have those. Why do you have to have them? To carry out council's decisions. There's that reminder again that the responsibility of council is not individual, but is collective, making decisions. I've used this slide for I don't know how many years, a lot. And every time I put a slide deck together, I debate whether to leave it out or not, because it comes from a book by Osborne and Gabler that I think was published in the 1970s. So it's been around a while. I'm not sure the book's relevant anymore, but this is a wonderful image. If you kind of take a look at it, council should steer the boat rather than row it. Staff's responsibility is to row it. The image is really strong and is really good. And keep it in mind if you're thinking of running for council. Your role is as a decision maker. Your role is not to be down in the weeds and doing the work with the staff. I call municipal governance the model that council uses to make decisions. And it's really important in terms of what that model looks like, and it looks different in municipalities right around the province. There are differences. The first thing that we've talked about excuse me, is the advice that council receives, and we know that the primary source of that advice is from staff. It's in the legislation, and from, day-to-day municipalities, it's true. It's just how it functions. The second place that council receives advice is from its committees, the committee structure that creates this governance model. There are, as I said, 440 municipalities, and there's probably close to 440 different committee structures around the province. They vary. There are distinguishing features in each. In fact, there are a few places that have no committees at all. There are 5-member councils, some in Northern Ontario, and the council has said, we don't need committees. We want to get the work done, we can get decisions made more quickly, and so they made that decision. Most municipalities have some sort of committee structure. So why does council create committees? Well, it's really simple. You create committees to provide advice to council and make recommendations. It's one more source of information that council receives. Council committees are created by council, they are mandated by council, and they're populated by council. Committees don't make up their own agendas, their own rules. They are bound by the rules of the municipality, and they are bound by the mandate given to them by their council. But they play an important role. The other thing about committees that becomes important, I was dealing with a municipality a couple of months ago, and they have these two factions in the municipality. One faction says people need to be able to come and get their voice heard at committee and at council, and if they have to come back for a second round, they should be able to do that. The other faction says, would you just make a decision? They are so slow at getting things done. My advice always has been the delegations, the public coming forward to be heard at a council meeting, when they come forward, they come forward, by the way, within the rules set out by the council's procedure bylaw, but they should only be heard once, either at committee or at council. Committees play a really significant role in determining and assisting council in making decisions at the end of the day. I've talked about local boards and the fact that they have a different reach, have a different relationship with the municipality, different function, and the municipality can't provide the services that the local boards do because the province dictates that. If you're thinking of running for council, you better love meetings. I mean, you better really love meetings. I had someone say to me within the last month, I'm running for council because it's 2 meetings a month and they send me a paycheck. And I said, no, you probably haven't got it quite right. You're going to have a couple of council meetings a month. You may have more if there are special meetings. You're going to have committees that you sit on, so you have to go to those meetings. You're probably going to be on a local board or two, so you have to go to those meetings. And there's community activities, meetings that you're going to for that. You're going to spend a lot of your life in meetings. And here's what you need to know. You better get good at it. Because if you don't, you're going to have a really miserable 4 years, because you're not going to achieve any of the things that you want to achieve. Remember my 5-person council? How many friends do you have to have on that 5-person council to get anything done? 2. Okay, and as the council gets bigger, you have to have more friends, because it takes 3 to pass it on a council. So you have to be good at meetings, and there are some strategies and techniques that you have to get comfortable with and learn, but you really need to understand that you're going to spend a lot of your life as a member of council in meetings. When I first went to Sudbury, part of the interview was really interesting. They said to me, "So do you know how to make council meetings shorter?" Well, yeah. Our meetings start at 7:30. And they said, well, no, they don't start at 7:30. They start at 6:30 with a closed meeting. And then at 7:30, the public meeting. And they never finish before midnight. And all the big decisions are made after midnight. And they said, we don't think that's a very good model. Can you help us out? Council made some changes, and they got their meeting time down, instead of after midnight, to around 9:30. So they got their meetings to 2 hours, sometimes less. It's important to look at ways to make your meetings efficient and effective. And there are techniques out there that get implemented from time to time. They make a huge difference. So you better love meetings, because it's part of your life, and you better get good at it, or you're going to get really frustrated by the process. Every municipality has a procedure bylaw. You need to read it. If you're thinking of running for council, you need to read the procedure bylaw in your municipality, and you're saying, oh, don't force me to read the procedure bylaw. Let me tell you this. It is one of the 2 most important documents in the municipality. The other one's the annual budget, because it sets your policy for the year. It sets your capital program for years to come. Procedure bylaw does a whole bunch of things that are so critical to your success on council. It sets the rules, meeting rules. What are the rules that apply? Council gets to write its own rule book. That's pretty cool. Province has some aspects that has to be in it, but council generally gets to write its own rule book. In fact, I can tell you this. I said that roles and responsibilities were one of the major areas the municipalities got in trouble. Meetings are another one. And I get a call from a clerk or a CAO or a mayor, and they say, we're having trouble, our meetings are out of control. And I stop the conversation there, and I say to them, let me read your bylaw first. And I read the bylaw, and I can predict 90% plus what their problems are. They're built into their bylaw. Having a good procedure bylaw makes a huge difference in council making good decisions. So it sets the meeting rules, but it defines relationships between the mayor and councillors, between council and staff, between council and the public. It sets the governance model for the type of committee structure you're going to have. It's a really significant, really important document. Take the time to read it. And if you're not clear about it, phone the clerk. Ask the question. Because that's what you're going to be living within the context of that for the next 4 years. Let's move to another direction. So it's election day, the results are in, and you won. Wow, everybody loves me. That doesn't last. But everybody starts to treat you differently from that minute on. For the next 4 years, you're a community leader. People talk to you differently. People will cross the street to ask you a question. People will try to contact you at all hours of the day and night. Social media, email, telephone, whatever the process. They see you in a different way. They see you as a community leader, and you're recognizable. I live in center of Toronto now. I have no idea what my councillor looks like. Never met him. I know it's a him. And that's not a surprise. He has somewhere, I forget the exact number, between 70 and 100,000 constituents in his ward. Oh, no wonder I don't know who he is. It's a very different environment, smaller communities. People know the members of council. They certainly did in Sudbury, and I know they will here. But you get into the townships and everybody knows you. It's a very different world. People know who you are. You cannot escape being a member of council. You are 24/7. They'll tell you this is a part-time job, but don't believe them. You may have a full-time job on the side, but this will consume every minute of your life. And it doesn't go away. Sometimes you need to just get out of town, go on vacation. I did that one time and ran into a councillor from Sudbury in Florida. We both... Darn, couldn't get away from him for a minute. And the first thing she did was ask me a question that was coming up at the council meeting. I thought, no, you can't get away from it. It requires, in my opinion, a total commitment on your part if you're going to be on council. I've been doing this exercise now with people, maybe for the last half dozen years or more. And I talk to people who have left the municipality. They're no longer on council, or they've retired as staff. And I talked to them about 6 months after they left. I said, so what's life like now? You know, any difference? And the reaction, every one of them says the same thing. I can't believe how involved it was, how, I couldn't get away from it. If I woke up in the middle of the night, I'm thinking about municipal issues. It doesn't go away. It really does consume you. And we had a phrase in Sudbury, and I've used it over the years, and municipal staff will instantly know, and members of council, I call it the insanity of City Hall. And it's there. There's just this passion that goes on, and it's really exciting most days. It's really fun, and it's very immediate because you're dealing with the public in a very immediate way. But it will consume you. I've done a few of these now, and I put this next bullet point on, and I'm never sure whether to tell the story or not. And I've told it in some places, and I haven't told it in other places. Let me tell you the story. About 10, 12 years ago, I did a session like this, and one of the people that was making some comments that night was a former mayor, Eastern Ontario, way east of here. And he got up and he spoke to the group, and he was no longer on council. He finished his term of council as mayor. He had been on council as a councillor, and he decided to run for mayor. Election night came along, the votes came in, and he won. He won. He went home. He said to his wife, I won. I'm the mayor of the township, and I'm on county council. And their 8-year-old son came in the room, and he said the same thing. I won. I'm the mayor, and I'm on county council. And this 8-year-old looked at him and said, I guess I lost. He understood he was going to see far less of his father over the next, it was 3 years at that time, than he was seeing him even now. It's important to understand being on council has a huge impact on family. And you have to have the conversation with your family about whether it's appropriate to run. There are a number of things to think about. It used to be, we used to talk about who's going to answer the telephone at home. That kind of gone. And so if your 10-year-old son is answering the phone and there's an irate parent at the other end, what do? Well, you teach them to hang up. But, with cell phones and social media, it's a very different way of messages getting through. And we're going to see this election, I think, fought, a lot of it on social media. And there's going to be things up there that maybe you don't want your family or your kids to see. It's going to be, in some places, a very interesting campaign. So you need to have that conversation. You need to have the conversation with your spouse that if council makes a decision that's not popular with part of your population, when a member of council goes, the classic example in Sudbury was the only municipality, this is back in the 80s, I guess, the only municipality in Ontario that had a store hours bylaw. Council member came to me and said, I want to expand the store hours. These weren't the hours they had to be open, but they could be open. He said, I want to expand the hours in the bylaw by 2 hours a week. And I said, that's a really bad idea. He said, no, I don't want to open it up. I just want 2 hours. People will accept 2 hours. So I drafted the bylaw, I did the report, council passed it. Every member of council that went into a store for the next several months got berated by the staff and by the owners. How dare you make us work more hours? That's not what the bylaw said, but that's what they said. More interestingly, though, was the spouses of every member of council were berated every time they went into a store. Understand, people are very passionate about issues in your municipality. Not all of them, but some of them. And it becomes really significant. You need to have the conversation. You can't shop the same way you might go grocery shopping now, because people will want to talk to you in the grocery store. I made a mistake one day of having to deliver some papers over to a councillor, and on a Saturday morning. So I took them over, and he said, he represented the Italian portion of Sudbury, so he was a really interesting guy and loved the community, and he said, come on, I just have to pick a couple of things up at the store. I should have known. We went to 3 stores, he bought 3 items, and we were there for 3.5 to 4 hours. I promised I would never go shopping with him again. He was out there talking to people, and he loved it. And the people loved it. And he got to hear what people were thinking within the community. Expect that sort of thing. People are going to want to do that. So a lot of this impacts on your family time. But here's something else that impacts on your family time that I think you really need to give some thought to. You better love to read. I said you better love meetings. Well, you better love to read, because you are going to be just inundated, and it doesn't stop for 4 years. And you're going to get agendas of material. I made a comment the other night at the session. When I left Sudbury, it was over 160 pages for a city agenda, council meeting. And someone in the audience said our municipality is up closer to 400 pages. And I don't care if you're getting that in hard copy or on a computer or a tablet. You need to read every word of it. And you need to read every word of it for 2 reasons. The first reason is you've committed, and you've got integrity, and you've committed that you're going to be prepared for meetings. There's nothing worse than having a council member who doesn't read the agenda in advance. And you know who they are. It's really simple, because they'll put their hand up and say, Your Worship, I have, and they ask a question, the answer to which is in the 3rd paragraph of the report. They haven't read it. That's embarrassing for everybody. But the other reason you need to read every single report and every single set of minutes coming from committee is there may be a pecuniary interest that you have. You may have a conflict buried in there. And you're responsible for that. It's relentless. The amount of documentation prepared by municipalities is astounding. And if you are on both the county, the lower tier, the township or town, whatever, and you're on the upper tier, the county, double it. Because you're getting those agendas for both those levels of government. That's when the young boy figured out Dad's workload's just doubled. We're going to see him less. So you need to find time to do this prep. In Sudbury, council member used Sunday afternoons and evenings. That was their time away from their family. That was their time to read agendas. It's really important. But you got to do it. So you better love meetings and you better really love to read. You never know when you do something and it's backwards. I've got my notes on the opposite side of it I normally do, so I'm almost feeling like I'm going backwards in the presentation. It's really weird. Okay, I want this kind of a slide to move us into some other topics. I mentioned the fact that if you are elected to council, you are not a manager. Micromanaging by members of council, that is directing staff to do work, is one of the most corrosive things that can happen in a municipality. That's why the province put that council member staff policy. That's why there's provisions in the code of conduct to deal with it. It's inappropriate conduct. You need to be really cautious about it. I've done some integrity commissioner investigations around that issue, and it is really disruptive to the organization. Don't do it. If you're even thinking about it, go get a full-time job with a municipality because you shouldn't be on council. The concept of incivility has been around a long time, but it's really, incivility is how you conduct yourself with others, how you treat others appropriately. It's really come to the fore in the last 2 or 3 years. It is, we're seeing more and more in some communities, other communities, it's not an issue at all. There's one community in Northern Ontario that has spent about $500,000 on integrity commissioner fees and lawyers' fees over the last 3 years. Because council just uses weapons that they perceive as weapons to attack other members of council. That's inappropriate. Incivility is really significant. Part of the training that I do with my colleague, we spend time training the new councils on incivility, what things to watch out for and how to deal with it and what's appropriate. It's really important, it's really significant. I'll come to confidentiality in a few minutes because I think it's one that you have to at least give some thought to. It's important to keep it in mind as we go through this. But let's start by talking about codes of conduct. Members' codes of conduct. These apply to council members and committee members and local board members. Up until about, I'm not sure the date, maybe 4 years ago, give or take, there were a few municipalities in the province that had codes of conduct for members of council, and they all looked different, and they all had an integrity commissioner whose responsibility, who's an officer of the corporation, by the way, was to do investigations and report to council on members' conduct. The province has made it mandatory. Every municipality has to have a code of conduct for members, and it passed a regulation saying these are some of the topics you must cover. Some municipalities cover that, and that's all. Other municipalities have added some items into it. I'm a big fan, you just follow the regulation, but every municipality has to have one, a code of conduct. They are approved by council, by bylaw, and the integrity commissioner's role has expanded. Not only does the integrity commissioner do investigations and report to council, also has some responsibilities under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, but there's an obligation to educate not only council members but the public. And there's a new wrinkle that's really interesting that says members of council can ask for an opinion from the integrity commissioner on the code or on conflict of interest. They have to ask for it in writing, and they will get a response in writing. Now that's new, that's unique, and it gives members of council an opportunity to get some advice in advance of a situation that may be coming up. Prior to that being in place, members of council often went and retained their own lawyer to get some advice on it. So, codes of conduct are mandatory. They apply to all members of councils, committees, and local boards. You should expect training from your integrity commissioner after the election, and you will have that ability to ask for an opinion from the integrity commissioner. Municipal Conflict of Interest Act came into place in 1972. And it came into place because there were some members of councils around the province who had businesses in town and they wanted to contract with the municipality, but they were expressly precluded from doing so. They could not contract with the municipality. So the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act came into effect to allow members of council to contract with the municipality and to do a number of other things too. This act applies only to members, it does not apply to staff. It has a number of components to it, and I just want to take you through them quickly. Pecuniary means financial. Pecuniary means financial. So what you declare at a council meeting is a pecuniary interest. One of your biggest challenges if you are elected to council is trying to learn to pronounce the word pecuniary. Most people get it after about 6 months to a year, but more people stumble over the word. It's fascinating. I don't know why the province doesn't just call it conflict. Conflicts that are direct are pretty straightforward. If I own Fred's widget shop on Main Street and I want a contract to supply widgets to the municipality, when that comes to council, I will put my hand up at the beginning because it's an item right at the beginning of the council agenda, and I'll say, Your Worship, I want to declare a pecuniary interest on item 4 because I own Fred's widget shop. And the clerk will record what I said in the minutes. But there are other kinds of interests as well, indirect ones, and they can be family. A parent or spouse or a child, if their interest is known to you, becomes yours. If you're part of a corporation, shareholder, or certain types of corporations, or a director, Fred's Widget Shop Limited, I have a pecuniary interest and I have to declare. There are other relationships, employer-employee, membership of certain bodies within the municipality. Remember I said you have to be reading every page of every piece of material that comes to you? You're looking for those buried pecuniary interests. And they may be in a committee report that you're not part of the committee. It may be coming to council from another direction. You have to be aware of them. The rules changed recently, and instead of just having to declare verbally at the meeting, members who have a pecuniary interest must now also file a written declaration with the clerk. And the clerk will take the written declaration and the verbal one that's now in the minutes and put it into a registry. And that registry is there for everybody to see. And I suspect over the next few months, people are going to be looking at that registry to see when a member declared a pecuniary interest, or more interesting, when they don't. So, obligation, if you have a pecuniary interest, you have to declare it. This is part of this transparency issue. You have to declare it both verbally and in writing. And it's all the obligation on the member to make sure it got recorded properly, both in the minutes and in the registry. It's a personal obligation. In addition to the declaration, members have to do certain things, or not do certain things, I suppose. Firstly, they cannot participate or vote on the item when it comes before council or committee. That makes sense. But also, the Act also says that they cannot influence. And influence means influencing other members of council and staff. So you're really out of the game. I haven't had this time around, but 4 years ago I had two gentlemen in two different parts of the province, and they both came to me after and said, this was really interesting, but I'm not going to run. And I said, why? And they said, because I have property and I want to get developed, and I thought I could do it quicker by being on the inside than the outside. And they said, I realized they can't do that. And so they said, not going to run. They want to develop their land. So you have to declare, you can't vote or participate, and you cannot influence. And influence means any time before or during or any time after the meeting. It's pretty broad. There's a book that if you're thinking of running for council, I'd encourage you to obtain a copy of it. It's called Ontario's Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, a handbook. It's a terrible title, but it's a good book. It's published by Municipal World. You can find it on the Municipal World website. I encourage every member of council, once they're elected, to have a copy of this. In fact, some municipalities provide it to every member of council. So it's Municipal World, Ontario's Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. It takes every section of the act, and it takes all of the cases decided between 1972 and 2019. Take a look at it. Up until a few years ago, if a person wanted to complain about a member who they believed had a conflict and didn't declare it, their remedy was to go to court at their cost. Pretty expensive. So that, I think, deterred a lot of people from bringing applications against members of council. That's changed in the last few years. And now, an elector, this act has been limited to electors, it's a bit broader now, but an elector has a choice. They can still go to court, or they can complain to the Integrity Commissioner. And the Integrity Commissioner will do an investigation and make a determination whether the matter should go to court. And if it does go to court, and the court has a considerable range of powers and ability, and it ranges from kind of a slap on the wrist to removing the member from council, to keeping the member off council for up to 7 years, and the court can order damages. Pretty significant in terms of the impact. So who pays for all this now? Municipality, not the individuals. That's significant. And so we're seeing a real uptake in some parts of the province on more and more conflict of interest claims. Other municipalities I go to, they haven't had one conflict of interest or code of conduct this term of council. But other municipalities, it's costing the municipality a lot of money. As I said, all those costs are borne by the municipality itself. Confidentiality is important. Members of council, as leaders of the committee, carry around all sorts of confidential information. It's in their head, it's on paper, on their tablet or computer, whatever. They need to understand what is confidential, what isn't, and if they're not clear, they need to be asking advice from staff, CAO, perhaps the clerk, and find out what they're entitled to share with the public. They have to be careful when they're sitting having a coffee. If you go have coffees now, are you telling information you shouldn't be? What are you putting online? What's appropriate and what isn't? You have to be careful. And as I said before, members of council, councillors, other than the mayor, do not speak on behalf of the municipality. Confidentiality is really important. It can have a huge impact on your municipality, particularly if it's a major issue with significant dollars involved. I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about water. We all remember Walkerton. The response of the province to the Walkerton situation was to pass a piece of legislation called the Safe Drinking Water Act 2002. And they brought that act into effect except one section that dealt with personal liability of members of council. And personal liability of, well, it refers to decision makers. We know members of council are decision makers, but it also applies to senior staff and to your water operator. So nobody paid any attention to the fact this wasn't in effect and life just sort of went on. I have to tell you, that piece of legislation, when it was passed, was considered probably the best water protection legislation in the world. Walkerton Clean Water Center was built. It doesn't supply water to Walkerton. It's a research facility and it's amazing. I've been there 3 times, I think. It's just incredible. So the province took a response that was really appropriate at the time. That was 2002. In 2012, at the Association of Municipalities Conference, it's in August, the province announced that that section bringing personal liability to decision makers was coming into effect on January 2013. As a sector, we scrambled because we had to begin to train members of council and senior staff what it meant to have this personal responsibility and personal liability. This is separate and apart from corporate liability. January 1st came into effect, and about a month into the year, there was a case in southwestern Ontario. The incident occurred 8 years or so before, and it went to trial. The municipality was fined a significant fine. The chief water operator was fined another fine and jailed for 30 days. I was doing a session training on this legislation at a conference, the Good Roads Conference, in February or March, and the mayor of that municipality was in the audience, about 75 people. And he came to me at the break and he said, "Do you think I could talk to this group?" And I said, "Sure, the floor is yours." And here's what he said. He said, "We've been told by our lawyers and confirmed by the lawyers for MOE that if that section had been in effect when that incident occurred several years before, every member of council would have been charged." I'm not here to scare you, but I am here to make you realize there are significant obligations, and part of what you take on is understanding some of the risks that you have and understanding that the importance of being trained on these highly technical areas is really critical. Municipalities carry insurance to protect you, but you've got to ensure that you are doing the training, that you know how to act as a reasonable person in your situation would act. And that means, what questions do I ask? What reports do I have to have in place? What information do I need before I can make a decision dealing with the protection of the public and the water supply of water? It's really important, and we see this in other technical aspects of what local government does. It's a significant decision to run for council. It has a lot of impact, it has a lot of importance. You're doing wonderful things for the community, but as I said before, it takes your time, and it takes your time both in research and time at meetings and times getting to know what the public wants in terms of things they think should come to council. So here's the summation, really quickly. You need to know what you're elected to do, and you need to know what everybody in the organization is there to do, and you need to respect that. It's really important. Powers rest with council, not with councillors, but with council. You're not managers. You have no right to manage staff. And if you try, you will have detrimental impact on your organization, I guarantee it. Know what your personal obligations are. A whole series of areas. I've just highlighted a few tonight. It's a family decision. Talk to your family about it because it impacts them as well as it impacts you. The other thing is, it's an amazing place to be. I love local government. I really appreciate people who are involved with it and the commitment they make to it. And as I said before, the two factors in my world are that really good members show integrity and they show vision for their community. So if you're thinking about it, whether you decide to run or not, I want to congratulate you. I think it's a really important decision. We can now do some questions.
I have a question. My question is, if there is a Safe Water Act, is there also an act that means a municipality is responsible for the safety of people on the streets, people who are unhoused, people who are in poverty? Is there a similar kind of a act?
No.
That's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah. Municipalities are attempting to do some things, different ones do different things, but there's no equal legislation to what we see in the water. It's a good point.
Thank you. I would like that to happen in our new municipal.
But that comes, you've got to get the province convinced to do it to give the authority.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Any other questions? There's a microphone if you're going to ask one. Get used to asking questions if you're running for council because you'll have lots there. Yell it out and all your...
If I run for council, does that mean I'm no longer a person? Does that make sense to you? Could I go beyond council and yet go talk as an individual at council?
So the question is, do you cease being a person if you get on council? That is, can you go talk to people not in your council role? Well, you can try, but in my experience, people listen to you as a community leader now. Sure, you can be in situations where that may not be the case, but I can tell you, you wear it all the time. And people see you in the context of being a member of council. You don't lose your status as a person, but you perform a role that's really significant. Is there another question? There's one.
Who or what decides whether a council is full-time or part-time?
Council.
There's
Council.
no population factors or anything like that?
No. Council decides whether the members are full-time or part-time. Council decides the remuneration paid to members of council. It's entirely up to the council. There are very few full-time councils across the province. The ones around the GTA, around Toronto, are full-time. And when you get into full-time councillors, there's a cost to that too, because you are also paying them a lot more, but you're also paying them for support staff. I don't know how many Toronto has, but I suspect they probably have 6 to a dozen people each as support staff. This gentleman, then there's a couple of questions at the back. Let's.
I don't know if I need this.
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
No, because people are watching.
Okay, I'm curious of one thing. If you have a council of 5 people and one of them dies or gets dismissed, how do they fill that extra position? Because then you're down to 4, right?
Okay, you can only get dismissed in one way, and that's through the conflict of interest legislation.
Right.
But somebody moves out of the community.
Right, they move out.
We don't want to wish them dead, we just want them, they're gone.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're down to 4. The Act says the municipality, the council, has a choice. It can appoint someone, or it can have a by-election. And it's council's decision, council's choice. Up until a certain date, and I can't remember what it is, it's coming up, I think, pretty soon. And once that date passed, when you get close to the election, it has to be an appointment. But generally speaking, they have the choice of appointing or having a by-election.
I just wanted to ask about the accountability to the corporation, which you mentioned. You said that council has accountability to the corporation.
Well, council is the corporation in terms of in terms of the decision-making power, individual members of council have accountability to the corporation. They have to act in the best interest of the corporation, and that's what the Act said, and that's what your insurance policies say for municipalities.
So what about the best interest in the citizens or their constituents?
Yeah, I talked about that too. Remember I said municipality, and that phrase had two meanings? One was the community, that's the people in the community, and the other is the municipal corporation. Sure, the expectation is that members of council represent the public and bring those concerns and interests of the public to the council table. That's part of that link that's there. It's really important. Does that help?
Yeah, generally, how broad is the experience of like any given council? Is there an expected professional type of experience to have had, or is it pretty broad?
Individual councillors?
Individuals, yeah.
This is about 12 or 14 years ago. I was doing a session right after the election, orientation session. And one of the things we always do is ask is, what got you interested in running for council? And you get the traditional answers, I wanted to give back to the community and all that stuff. And this guy got out. Small community in Northern Ontario, about an hour from Sudbury. And he stood there and he kind of looked around and he said, I got drunk at a bonspiel. And he found his name on the ballot and he won. And we're thinking, oh my gosh, poor council. I saw him 6 months later and I saw his mayor 6 months later. He was an amazing councillor. I don't think education has anything to do with it. I think the integrity and the vision really come to play. Education isn't a bad thing to have, but I think there are a lot of factors that go into making a good councillor. Really significant. I have a lot of the councillors I worked with worked for Ingle, and a lot of them, several of them were undergrad, they're minors, and then most of those made outstanding councillors. They worked really hard.
Yes, thank you for coming and giving us this great information. My question is a conflict of interest potential question. I'm on the board of directors for a non-for-profit charity, as well as I'm also event coordinator for a special needs baseball team every year. If I was elected to councillor, would I have to step down from these roles and responsibilities?
I think there are cases on that. You have to read the book to start with. I don't get a commission on the book, by the way. It's just well written. If you were elected, you would ask that question of the Integrity Commissioner. But because you're not yet elected, you may have to retain your own lawyer to get some advice after you've read the book and got a bit of a general education. As I say, you're probably, well, you may be okay, but you may not be, and you want to be really clear. It takes a while to look at every circumstance and be sure.
So with the Integrity Commissioner, is that only offered to City Council electees, or, for example, we have a room of individuals that might want to talk to the Integrity Commissioner? Is that an avenue within the City of Peterborough, or is that not an option?
You have to be elected, or you have to be a member of a committee or a local board.
Thank you very much.
But you raise a really interesting point. Maybe the IC should have a responsibility to answer some general questions at sessions like this. I don't know, but it's not in the legislation right now. Good point. Yes.
Hi, Fred. Peterborough, like many, almost all municipalities, is struggling with opioids and how to deal with it. And I was hoping that you could maybe clarify for everybody in the room where the municipality jurisdiction ends and the provincial jurisdiction starts, because opioids and addiction are healthcare, which is provincial. But how do we navigate that as a new council?
I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. You're right, it's a provincial responsibility, but it has a real impact on your municipality. So you've got to be looking at programs that you are able to provide within the scope of your responsibility. The The primary cost for all that, though, is provincial, and it's at the provincial level and the responsibility. But council needs to be working with the province to find solutions, and I think that goes on behind the scenes all the time in lots of municipalities across the province. Not sure that's a great answer, but
It's definitely a tricky issue.
no question.
Within the municipality. My other question to you, it's a bit of a leading question for you, because I know that whenever the new council comes in, one of the first jobs that they will have is their very first budget, almost as soon as the inaugural happens. So what would you recommend to everyone about teaching themselves about a municipal budget before they actually are tasked with that responsibility so quickly?
Okay, let's do a couple of things you may want to do if you're thinking of running for council. First question I would ask you, you don't have to put your hand, have you been to a council meeting? Have you subjected yourself to 4 hours of municipal council? Because if you haven't, and there's an amazing number of people who never go to a council meeting before they run. And they get there and it's like, I had no idea this was what it was like. If you haven't been, go. And I don't mean, well now I guess we're doing it virtually, but if, you know, you need to watch how council operates and functions. I have this weird habit of, this is pre-COVID, but I'd be traveling, I travel a lot, and I'd wander into municipal offices, and if there was a council meeting, I'd just go sit at the back. And a colleague of mine said I just do that because I can get the tax write-off. But that really isn't the reason. I just find it really interesting how councils make decisions. I've lost the point of your question. I'm sorry. I was having so much fun with traveling.
Sorry, no, just understanding a municipal budget.
Oh, the municipal budget. Municipal budgets are really complex in a lot of ways. There are two aspects to it. There's a current budget, that's the general operating for the current year, and there's a capital budget. Those are the big ticket items, some of which get done this year. Capital budgets, in my world, should go out 20, 30, 40 years. You need to have a sense of where the municipality is going. You can obtain copies, I suspect on most municipal websites, you can find the municipal budget. You can take a look at it and read it. You should expect, though, if you are elected to council, that you will be trained really, really well in the budget process. You're right, it's one of the very first things that come at you, and it comes at you like a freight train. And they will drop this much paper on you, a whole lot. You'll start hearing presentations from staff. You need to get some background and some just general knowledge. And you'll be hearing from ratepayers who want things or don't want things. And you have to get a sense of what that's about. My rule is that the budget for the year after the election, so the budget for 2023, you should be dealing with fairly early in the new year. Now the term starts earlier this time than ever, but you should be getting to it January, February. 2024 and 25 and 26, you should be approving it in December for that next year. It's important that they have the budget in place so staff knows what to spend and how much to spend. It's important. But the budget's really important, you're right. It comes at you, it's a lot of technical detail. Talk to your treasurer. If you know, I talked about talking to the clerk and talking to the CEO, talk to the treasurer. They might be able to give you some advice and just, you know, municipal budgets for dummies. That's the one I've always had to use because I'm not very good at it. But it's really important. It's an important part of your job, and you're being asked to make significant decisions within the first short period on council. Good questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I thought you did an excellent job differentiating between the roles of council and staff. And one of the things that I found interesting is that the staff is there to execute the plan, that the decisions that form that plan by council. But staff has a great deal of responsibility to the province in terms of legislative reporting, what have you. If you have an administration that has a weak CAO, can you just talk a little bit about what avenues the council has in terms of getting things done? Because if you're a new council coming in and you don't have that strength in your administration, are there things the council can do to help the CAO and the admin team?
Absolutely. There's training that can happen. My colleague and I do a 4-day course for CAOs. We've run it for the last 12 or 14 years, off and on. So there's that type of program out there that can give some advice. There's a CAOs association that people can go to and get some advice from their peers around the province, if you will. Council should expect that the CAO is performing at a satisfactory level, and that could become a performance appraisal issue if it's serious enough. But it sounds like the way you described it, it's the CAO and the senior managers that need some training and some help. And they need that because they're providing this advice to council. It's really important. The better decisions, the better reports they give, the better decisions come to council. Good question. Any more?
I have one other, unless somebody else wants to go first.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
While they get the microphone.
Okay. So this question, Fred, is really for education. I know the answer, but I think it's a really important area to be understood, and that is the relationship between council and mayor and the police and police board. I know as a councillor, I can't talk about line items within the police budget. I only get to vote on the total, and I have really no jurisdiction over the police board. But I think people really need to understand that. If you could maybe elaborate on that relationship, please.
Well, the relationship between council and every local board is different. So the library board, for example, council approves the budget of the library board. That's not the case in the police services board. That budget is presented to council and it pretty much has to be approved the way it's presented. And there's an appeal process that you can go up through the province to get it approved eventually. There's a different relationship for conservation authorities and health units. And the budgeting for each one of those is done in a different way, and the responsibilities are reported back in different ways. So there's no simple answer in terms of all the boards, but yeah, you're pretty restricted in terms of police services board in terms of what you can do. There's a question back here.
If you were running on an issue that was supported by your constituents and it went to council and didn't have enough votes to give the response that the community was looking for, as a councillor, is your obligation to the people who elected you, or is your obligation to the council in showing a unified voice?
There's nothing says you have to be a unified voice at council. Oh my gosh. Yikes. In fact, the courts have described members of council as independent legislators. We don't have a party system in Ontario. Independent legislators. So you bring your own independent points of view to council. That's really important to understand. Are you there to bring what the public wants you to bring? You might, but you might not agree with the public. They're saying you should do this, you should do, and your perspective is different because you've got a broader view because you're on council, and you may not support their position. But yeah, generally, members of council are talking to council and they're bringing points of view that they hear within their community. And that's part of it. It's really important.
So that's really different from governance on as a board of directors then? Quite opposite.
How do you say, why do you say that?
Because boards, once a decision is made, is supposed to speak with a unified voice.
Oh.
I would expect the same from council, if decisions are being made that way. Just for clarity, that's all.
Okay, remember what I said, that the mayor has an obligation to speak on behalf of the municipality. So let's suppose the mayor voted on a matter and voted this way, and the majority of council voted this way. Okay, in the majority, this was carried. The mayor's obligation is to speak on behalf of the municipality. That means supporting the decision of council. That obligation is not there for councillors, other members of council. So another member of council can speak and say, you know, I don't like what council did. made a mistake. That's really bad practice in my world. I think you're better off saying, council made a decision, we had a good debate, and let's move forward and get on with other issues. But the obligation on the mayor is different than it is on other members of council. But it's not this unified voice. That's the cabinet, secrecy cabinet at Queen's Park in Ottawa. It's very different. Anything else? This has been great. What a great audience. Thank you. And thank you if you're out there somewhere. Appreciate you taking the time. This is really important. And if you're thinking about it, I really recommend it. Providing leadership to your community is so important. And you will go through frustration and thrills and happiness and just this immediacy of everything rushing at you. And that's usually within the 10 minutes of any given council meeting. It's really an exciting place to be. And you make a difference. You make a huge difference to your community. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.
Fred, I just wanted to say on behalf of the city and the county colleagues and everyone here tonight, thank you very much for imparting your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it. Wish everyone well.
Yep. Safe travels.
We'll